The air in the cargo hold was cold, a stark, sterile cold that had nothing to do with the altitude. It was a cold that felt like finality. He stood on the tarmac, the engines of the massive passenger jet whining softly, a sound that felt profoundly disrespectful in the silence that should have been. His uniform was immaculate, the creases sharp, the brass buttons polished to a mirror sheen. Every detail was an act of devotion, a final salute. Inside the aluminum transfer case at his feet, draped in the silent, vibrant colors of the American flag, was his friend. His brother, a man who had left home full of life and was now returning as precious, solemn cargo. His mission was simple, one of the most sacred duties a soldier can perform: to see him home, to never leave his side. But as the ground crew began their work, and the first leg of this long, painful journey came to a close, he could feel a different kind of cold creeping in. It wasn't the chill of loss, but the icy touch of indifference. He was about to step into a different kind of battle, one fought not with rifles in a foreign land, but with quiet words and an unshakable will in the brightly lit, impersonal corridors of an airport. The airline had its rules, its schedules, its bottom line. They had no idea who he was escorting, or the promise he had made. They were about to learn. The journey had begun hours before, on a wind-swept runway thousands of miles from here. The dignified transfer, as it's officially known, was a ceremony of heartbreaking precision. Every fold of the flag, every measured step of the honor guard, every silent salute was a testament to a life of service. He remembered standing there, his own hand held firm at his brow, his gaze fixed on the casket as it was carried from the belly of a gray military transport. He was Sergeant Marcus Thorne, and inside that casket was Specialist Leo Gallo. Leo. He couldn't think of him as the fallen. Not yet. To him, he was still the kid from Arizona with a goofy grin who could quote entire movies verbatim and who always talked about his high school sweetheart, Chloe. He'd been the one to mentor Leo, to guide him through the initial shock and awe of deployment, to teach him how to stay sharp, how to stay alive. And when the worst had happened, when a single, terrible moment had silenced that laughter forever, Marcus had made a silent vow: he would take him home. He had requested the duty of escort. It was a role steeped in tradition and governed by strict military protocol. The escort is a guardian, a sentinel who stays with the fallen service member from the moment they begin their journey home until they are reunited with their family. You don't leave them. You don't let them out of your sight. The regulations are clear, and they are sacred. The first flight was uneventful, a charter that understood the gravity of its passenger. The flight crew was somber, respectful. They gave him a wide berth, their glances a mixture of pity and gratitude. When they landed in a major U.S. hub for the connecting flight, the transfer was handled with quiet efficiency by the ground crew. Marcus watched every second, his jaw tight, his posture rigid. He was a statue of military bearing, but inside, a storm of memories and grief raged. He remembered Leo showing him a picture of the engagement ring he'd bought online. A simple sapphire, he said, matched Chloe's eyes. He remembered the long, quiet nights talking about their plans for when they got back, opening a food truck, maybe, or just finding a quiet piece of land to build a life on. These memories were now ghosts, haunting the edges of his mission. As the transfer case was loaded onto a new baggage cart for the final leg of the journey, a short domestic flight to Leo's hometown. Marcus prepared to follow. He had his own ticket for the flight, of course. His orders were clear. He was to board with the other passengers, but his duty was to first watch and ensure the dignified loading of Leo's casket. That was the protocol. That was the promise. He approached the gate agent for his flight, a woman with a practiced, detached smile, ready to present his orders and explain his duty. He expected the same somber understanding he had received thus far. The airport was a blur of hurried travelers, rolling suitcases, and garbled announcements. It was a world of trivialities, of missed connections and overpriced coffee, a world Leo would never experience again. Marcus felt a profound sense of separation from it all, an invisible wall between his sacred duty and the mundane chaos surrounding him. He was walking in a different reality, one where every step was heavy with the weight of a hero's sacrifice. The gate agent tapped at her keyboard, her eyes flicking across the screen. He stood patiently, holding his orders in his hand, waiting for her to look up, waiting to begin the final, painful chapter of bringing his brother home. He had no idea that this gate, this small linoleum-floored space of transit, was about to become a battleground. "I'm sorry, Sergeant," the gate agent said, her voice a practiced monotone that held no apology at all. She didn't look up from her computer screen. "The boarding door is closing in 5 minutes. You need to board now." Marcus kept his own voice low and steady, a skill honed in situations where raising it would have meant death. "Ma'am, with all due respect, I am the military escort for Specialist Leo Gallo. As per my orders and protocol, I must remain with him and observe the transfer onto the aircraft." He held out the folder with his official orders, the emblem of the Department of the Army clearly visible. The agent gave the folder a glance so brief it was insulting. "Sir, I understand, but our policy is that all passengers must be boarded 10 minutes prior to departure. The ground crew will handle the cargo. We have procedures for this." The word cargo hung in the air between them, a leaden, offensive weight. Marcus felt a muscle jump in his jaw, but he held his ground. "He is not cargo," he said, the words coming out colder than he intended. "He is a fallen United States soldier, and he is my responsibility until he is released to his family. The military protocol supersedes your airline policy. I will board the plane, but only after I have seen him safely and respectfully loaded." The line behind him was growing. A businessman in a wrinkled suit sighed impatiently. A mother tried to shush her crying child. The world kept spinning its axis of petty concerns. The gate agent finally looked at him, her eyes devoid of empathy. She saw a man in a uniform holding up her departure time. "Sir, I have a flight to dispatch. The ground crew is trained. Your ticket will be canceled if you do not board now." That is the final word. It was a threat, plain and simple. Abandon your post, abandon your friend, or be left behind. Marcus couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had navigated the complex, often terrifying, landscape of a war zone. He had faced down armed insurgents and disarmed explosive devices. And here he was, being stonewalled by a corporate policy, being told to abandon his post. He thought of Leo's parents, waiting at the other end of this flight. He thought of Chloe, her world already shattered, waiting for the final, terrible confirmation of her loss. Leaving was not an option, Mom. He began again, his voice dangerously quiet. "I don't think you understand the gravity of this situation. I am not asking for a favor. I am informing you of my duty, a duty that is federally recognized and respected by every other airline I have ever had the solemn occasion to fly with on such a mission. I will not be boarding this aircraft until I see that flag-draped case loaded. It's that simple. The agent's face hardened. She picked up the phone at her desk. Sir, if you continue to refuse to board, I will have to call security. The standoff was no longer just a disagreement. It was an ultimatum. The businessman behind him muttered, "Just get on the plane, pal." But a few others in line had started to pay closer attention. An elderly woman with a VFW pin on her coat looked on with concern. A young man in a college hoodie discreetly pulled out his phone and started recording. The gate agent was speaking into the phone now, her voice low but agitated. Marcus simply stood there, a bulwark of quiet defiance. He would not fail Leo. He would not break his promise. The brightly lit terminal, with its cheerful advertisements for vacation getaways, felt like a scene from a nightmare. He was a guardian at the gates of hell, and the gatekeeper was armed with a rule book. The arrival of 2 airport security officers did not have the effect the gate agent had intended. They were not aggressive, stormtrooper types, but 2 older men whose weary expressions suggested they had seen it all. They approached Marcus cautiously, their hands hovering near their belts out of habit, not threat. "Sir, is there a problem here?" one of them asked, his eyes taking in the crisp uniform, the stoic demeanor, and the folder of orders Marcus still held. Before Marcus could reply, the gate agent interjected, her voice sharp with indignation. "This passenger is refusing to board. He's holding up the entire flight and violating policy." Marcus turned his head slowly, meeting the first officer's gaze. "My name is Sergeant Marcus Thorne," he said, his voice resonating with a calm authority that cut through the agent's agitation. "I am a United States Army escort. My duty, under military and federal protocol, is to accompany a fallen soldier, Specialist Leo Gallo, home to his family. That protocol requires me to witness his remains being loaded onto this aircraft. I will not abdicate my duty." He opened the folder and presented the orders. The security officer took them, his partner looking over his shoulder. They read the documents in silence. The formal language, the official seals, the stark, undeniable purpose of his mission hung between them. The officer handed the orders back to Marcus, a flicker of understanding, of respect, dawning in his eyes. "He's right," the officer said, turning to the gate agent. "This is a military escort. There are protocols for this. You need to let him do his job." The agent was flabbergasted, her face turning a blotchy red. "But our departure time!" "My supervisor will." It was at that moment that the cockpit door of the aircraft opened, and the pilot, a man with silvering hair and captain's bars on his shoulders, emerged onto the jet bridge. He had clearly been listening to the commotion on the radio. He walked directly to the gate, his expression firm. He ignored the agent and the security officers and walked straight to Marcus. "Sergeant," he said, extending his hand. "Captain Evans, I heard there was an issue." "What's going on?" Marcus, momentarily surprised by the direct address, shook his hand. "Captain, I'm just trying to do my duty by my soldier." The pilot's eyes softened with a deep, immediate understanding. He nodded, then turned to the gate agent, his voice dropping an octave, losing all its earlier warmth. "Is there a reason you are preventing this soldier from performing his solemn, federally protected duty to a fallen American hero?" The question posed so directly by the man in command of the aircraft, sucked all the air out of the agent's argument. She stammered, "Policy, the schedule." The pilot cut her off. "My aircraft will not move until this sergeant is satisfied. My aircraft will not move until Specialist Gallo is aboard and has been treated with the honor he is owed. Is that understood?" The agent simply stared, speechless. The pilot then turned to the other passengers in the now silent and watchful line. "Folks," he announced, his voice carrying through the gate area, "we will be delayed for a few minutes. We are honored to be transporting a fallen American hero home today, and we will be affording his escort every courtesy and all the time he needs to see his duty done. Thank you for your patience." A ripple of applause started, soft at first, then growing stronger. The businessman who had been complaining earlier now had the decency to look ashamed. The young man who had been filming now had his camera pointed squarely at the pilot, capturing a moment not of conflict, but of profound, unassailable principle. The pilot gave Marcus a short, sharp nod. "Sergeant, please, go see your friend aboard. We'll be here when you're done." The victory was not triumphant. It was somber, heavy. As Marcus walked out onto the tarmac, escorted by the pilot himself, the tension at the gate was replaced by the vast, echoing quiet of the airfield. The ground crew, who had been waiting in confusion, now stood with a renewed sense of purpose, their movements careful and reverent. They understood. The baggage cart with the transfer case was brought alongside the aircraft's cargo hold. Marcus stood watch, his feet planted, as they prepared the lift. He placed a gloved hand on the flag, a fleeting, final touch. It was a silent goodbye, a promise kept. He watched as the casket was gently, meticulously raised and guided into the belly of the plane, secured with a care that went far beyond mere procedure. He stayed until the cargo door was closed, a final seal on this chapter of Leo's journey. Only then did he turn back. As he walked back up the jet bridge, Captain Evans was waiting for him at the aircraft door. "Everything to your satisfaction, Sergeant?" he asked quietly. Marcus simply nodded, the words caught in his throat. He stepped onto the plane. The atmosphere inside was unlike any commercial flight he had ever been on. It was silent. The passengers, who had been told the reason for the delay, looked at him as he walked down the aisle to his seat. Their expressions were not of annoyance or impatience, but of respect, of sorrow, of shared humanity. A few people nodded to him. An older gentleman reached out and briefly touched his arm as he passed. There were no empty platitudes, just a profound, unspoken acknowledgement of the precious weight the plane was now carrying. He took his seat, the formality of his duty, now giving way to the crushing reality of his personal grief. The hero was home, but his friend was gone forever. The engines spooled up, a gentle hum now, no longer an intrusion, but the sound of progress, of a promise being fulfilled. He leaned his head back against the seat and closed his eyes, the image of Leo's laughing face burning bright in his memory. "We did it, Leo. We're going home. The journey home for our fallen heroes is a sacred trust, a final promise that our nation makes to them and their families. It's a promise that relies not just on military protocol, but on the decency and honor of everyday people." The story you just heard is a testament to the fact that sometimes one person's unwavering commitment to doing the right thing can remind us all of that sacred duty. These are the moments that reveal the true character of our country, not in the halls of power, but in the quiet corridors of an airport, where a promise to a friend outweighs any corporate rulebook. If these stories of principle, of honor, of everyday people living out profound truths resonate with you, then you're in the right place. We believe these lived truths are what connect us all. Please take a moment to subscribe to our channel, Lived Truths, and click the notification bell. We're dedicated to bringing you more stories like this, stories that matter, stories that remind us of the best of who we can be. As the plane reached its cruising altitude, the sterile quiet was broken by the soft chime of the intercom. It wasn't the usual cheerful announcement about turbulence or flight time. It was Captain Evans, his voice steady and solemn, filling the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "I want to once again thank you for your patience during our delay on the ground. As I mentioned, we have the distinct and solemn honor of carrying a true American hero with us today. In our cargo hold, draped in the flag he served so honorably, is Specialist Leo Gallo of the United States Army. Specialist Gallo made the ultimate sacrifice in service to our country, and we are now bringing him home to his family for his final rest." He paused, and in that pause, the weight of his words settled over every passenger. You could feel it. The air grew thick with shared reverence. Accompanying him on this final journey, the captain continued, is his friend and brother, in arms, Sergeant Marcus Thorne, who is seated with us in the cabin. On behalf of the entire crew, we extend our deepest condolences and our utmost respect to Sergeant Thorne and to the Gallo family. Today, we fly not just as passengers, but as a grateful nation. When we land, I ask that you remain seated for a few moments to allow Sergeant Thorne to deplane first, and to allow for a ceremony on the tarmac as Specialist Gallo is received by his family and an honor guard. Thank you. The intercom clicked off, leaving behind a silence more profound than before. It was a silence of unity, of shared respect. The rest of the flight passed in this state of quiet grace. Flight attendants moved through the cabin with a gentle deference. When one offered Marcus a drink, he politely declined, but she left a bottle of water on the empty seat beside him anyway, a small, kind gesture. He spent the flight staring out the window, watching the country unspool beneath him, a patchwork of farms and cities that Leo had died to protect. He thought about the paradox of it all, the immense, violent, and public nature of his death, and the quiet, intensely personal nature of the grief that followed. The descent was smooth. As the wheels touched down on the runway of the small regional airport, a place Leo would have known like the back of his hand, Marcus felt his heart clench. This was it, the end of the line, the end of his watch. As the plane taxied to the gate, he could see them through the small window. A military honor guard, their uniforms immaculate, stood at attention on the tarmac. A black hearse waited nearby, and a small group of people stood huddled together. A man and woman holding each other up, and a young woman with sapphire blue eyes who was weeping into her hands. Leo's parents, and Chloe. The engines powered down. As promised, every single passenger remained in their seat, their gazes directed forward, giving him his privacy. He stood, retrieved his cover, and walked down the aisle, his footsteps the only sound in the cabin. At the open door, Captain Evans and the entire flight crew stood in a line. They didn't speak. They simply saluted. A military salute from a civilian crew, a gesture of ultimate respect that broke through the last of Marcus's composure. He nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat, and walked down the stairs onto the tarmac. He had completed his mission. He had brought his brother home. His duty was over, but the memory of Leo and the fight to honor him would live on forever.